Oh, hello. Hello again, friends. We're here now with the Kill Team Quarter 4 FAQ. We've been anticipating this for a little while, so without further ado, let's get through the FAQ. Now, before I start, I hope nobody feels that I'm talking down to them. It's not my intention. I think Games Workshop have made this a little bit difficult to understand, so I'm just going to go through very quickly understanding FAQs. Each FAQ, these are all the ones that I've updated. You can see because the date has updated to today's date. Okay, so today is the 10th of the 8th. Each FAQ is a pair of documents. Some teams, like Commandos and Wormblade, don't have one or other of the documents because they haven't got any of the relevant changes. Okay, Bloodied also don't have a designer's commentary, but you can't see because my face is in the way. So each FAQ is a pair of documents. Errata changes the text of a rule. The designer's commentary explains a rule or how it's applied in a specific situation. These are supposed to be clarifications. Sometimes balance changes creep in. More properly, the balance changes should be in the balance data slate, which you already had for Q4. Sometimes balance changes creep in because the way Games Workshop thinks the rule's supposed to be played is not the way anybody in the community was playing it at all, and it feels like a buff or a nerf, and very occasionally they sneak in things that I'm pretty sure are genuine buffs or nerfs, but which they almost pretend, oh no, we always meant it to be that way around. So just bear that in mind. Sometimes it's a little hard to find the new rules. So the first thing to say is, in a document with a version number of higher than 1.0, the star always indicates new rules for the edition. Okay, so it's when I've got all the relevant new parts clipped out and put into the PowerPoint for you. If you're using these documents yourselves, the star is anything that they've added. Now, in the case of, for example, the Legionaries are really interesting. So the Legionaries have an Errata and designer's commentary, both at version 1.0. The Errata is unchanged. So they've changed the date because they've put in a new designer's commentary. The Errata says 1.0, there's no stars, and it's the same Errata from last quarter. The designer's commentary says 1.0 and there's no stars. It's all new, right? But they hadn't got a previous version of the designer's commentary to update. So just because this date has changed doesn't imply that both documents below have changed. And so in a couple of cases I was only able to work out what was new by comparing to what I said in the last slideshow. Okay? There is also blue text that shows where the new verbiage is inserted in an individual erratum, right? So when I'm changing the rules for a particular set of rules, the blue text indicates the new text to be inserted within the clause. Does that make sense? I hope so. Right, over the next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 slides, we're going to go through each of these different categories of changes, and I'm going to give you a little bit of commentary. So, core rules changes. A lot of this is going to seem obvious. Line of sight. Is an operative visible to itself? Yes, I assumed that. Everyone I ever played with has assumed that. We've all assumed that, right? Shooting attacks and fighting in combat. Do you have to declare the use of all rerolls before the dice are rerolled? No, you can see the result of a reroll before deciding on a different reroll. I always played it that way. I had heard in some corners of the internet there were people trying to make, especially novitiate players, because they tend to be the ones with fistfuls of rerolls, kind of commit, I'm going to reroll 2 dice, pick up the 2 dice and reroll them. You don't have to do that, guys. You can pick up a dice, re-roll it, see if you like the result. If you don't like the result, you can pick up another non-re-rolled dice and re-roll it. And then you can still decide to retain your re-rolled failed dice as passes using a different act of faith. So don't let people tell you have to nominate all your re-rolls before you can re-roll. I've always played it that way, but I had heard some people wibbling that it should be played differently. So it's nice to be vindicated in that regard. This one, Q. Some rules require you to roll dice as if that operative is fighting in combat or similar, e.g. the Corsair Void Scarred Slicing attack. First question, is the target considered to be fighting in combat too? No. Is the combat support applied? So this is where you have If you have an extra model next to your model, you get the bonus. Okay, yes. And question 3, can rules that take effect when the target is incapacitated in combat be used, e.g. the Legionaries' unending bloodshed? Yes, and this differs from Q1 because the target is still incapacitated in combat, even though it wasn't fighting in the combat itself. To me, that's kind of intuitively how I will play it, but I understand they've kind of made a rod for their own back where technically a lot of things didn't work, and so now they've had to kind of simplify how it works. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to come back to this one, which is the actual errata. We're going to go back up here. General principles. Some rules, such as the Phobos strike teams, track target action, interrupt an activation after an enemy operative performs an action. If it's the last action of an activation, or even the last action of the final activation of the turning point, can the activation still be interrupted? Yes. So people have tried to claim that if you can't use track target after the end of the last activation because the turning point immediately ends. No, the Phobos player still has an opportunity to perform that shooting attack. Is an operative equipped with the weapons it can use from psychic powers? For instance, can psychic power weapons be upgraded with rare equipment from the core book? No, and that's a narrative thing, to be fair. The reason this isn't in the narrative section, which is down here, no, this means that being injured won't affect the weapon's characteristics. So this, I think, is a buff compared to how most people played the game. If you have a Psyker with a power that is a shooting attack, and that Psyker is injured, that Psyker does not, apparently, suffer the -1 for that shooting attack. That's a buff to Legionaries, Thousand Sons, everybody that had psychic shooting attacks, in my opinion. If you were already playing in that way and you were thinking, Phil, that's obvious, let me know in the comments. To me, that is one of the most interesting things in the FAQ at all, because that is a genuine procedural change to the game. That is them saying that psychers with psychic shooting weapons do not suffer the injury penalty. Great. Some stuff here about Scramble. So, the scrap pile in Octarius. How far is an operative treated as moving and forming a scramble over or charge over action for the purposes of warp covens all is dust? The distance is travelled from the start of the action, so rubrics cannot really scramble over terrain. We have always played it this way. I think both myself and Zimbad and myself and my other friend up north who plays warp coven, I think we've always played it that way. Rubrics kind of hate scramble terrain. For scrap pile terrain in Killzone Octarius, can operatives that perform a free normal move or charge perform scramble over or charge over respectively instead? For example, during the free charge as a result of the Wormblade Locust's operative's Quicksilver strike action? Yes, that seems to be a little buff to those sorts of abilities regarding scramble terrain, because I don't think I would have normally played it that way. Maybe I would have done, I don't know, but that is certainly a nice little rule. That's quite permissive, that's good. And down here, I'm not going to take the piss by leaving my face over it. I've presented the Spec Ops rules here. They don't really mean anything to me. When using the equipment drop requisition, how do you determine the points worth of equipment if it has a splits cost? E.g. 1/3, use the lower cost. When an operative makes multiple shooting attacks from one shoot action, e.g. blast or torrent, does the sharpshooter battle honor apply to all the shooting attacks or just the first one? All of them. I hope that is helpful to the narrative players. And then finally, we've got the actual errata. Hang on, I'm going to make my laser pointer back. Finally, we got the actual errata down here. Vantage. So what they've done is it used to say in the book that the operative couldn't use the vantage, the floor of the vantage point or parts of the terrain featured below the vantage point to be in cover or to be obscured. They've now removed the clause about cover, so you can still, you can't claim it for obscuring, but you can still claim to be in cover, provided by the floor of your vantage point or any low parts of your vantage point. So if you're on a conceal, then you can count as being concealed and in cover, and if you are wanting to retain a dice for being in cover, you count as being in cover. So that's a bit of a buff, I would say. That is a material change again, and I would say that is a buff to anyone with a sniper type weapon, because it just further reduces the angles and things that people can do. So if you're on the... If you imagine... Let me just get a pen here. Where I think this is mainly going to come up, if you imagine the sort of standard, the Octarius terrain, that's like it's like an L shape, right, like this, okay, with a floor here, okay. If you are, let me change the colour because it's really hard to follow what's going on. If you're up here with your sniper rifle and somebody gets round to the open side, so somebody is on the open side, where are we? Down here, okay, and they're going to shoot you. They're going to draw their cover lines. Let's get another pen. They're going to draw their cover lines like so. Whoosh. Because they're going through the floor, right? You now count as being in cover by virtue of that floor, even if they got round the back of you. So if you're on a conceal, my understanding of the rule is now that you can't be shot, which seems like a lot, actually. You know, if you've got a sniper up there, you know, thinking about the novitiate crossbow lady, the vet guard sniper, the corsair sniper, any of these silent weapons where they're going to be on conceal the whole game, it now means really the only way you're going to kill that model is combat, right? Or with some sort of ability. If I'm wrong, because that seems like a massive boon to a mechanic which players of teams without silent weapons already found somewhat oppressive. About 50% of teams have silent weapons. That seems like a bit of a boon. If I've got that wrong, let me know in the comments. But it seems to be saying, if you go and get your rulebook, turn to page 72, and get the actual rule open for this, it seems to be now they will still count as being in cover. They're not obscured, but remember, obscurity is about heavy terrain intervening at long ranges and stuff. They seem still to, if they ain't cover and on a conceal, then you can't shoot them. Yeah? Am I right? Let me know if I'm right. That seems to be what it says. That's huge. So this one here is huge, and this one up here is middling, right? And everything else is pretty obvious. I think this one might be a change for some people, actually. Sure. Yeah. Right, that's the core rules. That's probably, apart from the Phobos Marines, that's the biggest load of changes. The Corsair Void Guard. This used to say heavy cover. The enemy operative not within triangle of heavy cover, which was actually a nonsense. We knew what it meant, but it was technically a nonsense, so this is just a clarification. I don't think there's very much to see here. Okay. The fallow chew still works how basically you thought it worked, I should think. The Commando. So Skulk About, if you activate Skulk About, it means that your commandos on a conceal can retain saves of 1 as a success. And so now they're saying you can still do that even if the person shooting the commando would treat the conceal as an engage. For the purposes of Skulk About, they're still on a conceal. Possibly a slight buff, depending on how it was already being played. I don't play into or as commandos very often at all, so I don't know what the community consensus on this one was. Reads to me like a slight buff though, so that's good for commando players. They need a little bit of a boost at the moment. That's good. Legionaries. So these both relate to Nurgle, Mark of Nurgle abilities. When using the Disgusting Vigor ability, can I retain a successful normal save as a result of cover as a crit instead? So this ability lets you turn a normal into a cover save. It's just clarifying, can you do that with the normal save that you've got from cover into a crit? Yes, it must be decided before you roll your dice. Fine, yeah. Can the Malignant Aura Tactical Ploy reduce the number of defense dice rolls for an invulnerable save? Yes. Invulnerable saves specifically ignore the save characteristic modifiers and the APX special rule, but Malignant Aura affects the defense characteristic. So that seems probably, again, I'm not sure how these were being played, because I don't think I've personally ever played as or against Nurgle Mark Legionaries, but these are potentially two big buffs to what was already, I think, becoming the accepted meta way to run Legionaries. Now, we know that the FAQs and Erratas aren't there for balance. They're there for clarification. But this could be the shares rising for the Nurgle Legionaries potentially. If you play Nurgle Legionaries, let me know. Did you always play it this way, or are you rubbing your disgusting little hands together with glee? Let me know in the comments. Novitiates, Act of Faith, Faithful Blessing. So this is the reroll. Change the relevant part of the sentence to read: when a friendly novitiate operative is fighting in combat or making a shooting attack, or a shooting attack is being made against it, in the roll attack dice step for the former, or the roll defense dice step for the latter of that combat or shooting attack, reroll one of your attack dice or defense dice respectively. That's obviously always how it worked. I don't know what my fellow novitiate players were trying to get away with there, but cut it out. Right, that's fine. That's not a change that affects anybody that was playing with what the rule obviously said. Now it just says, oh, I didn't mean to cross it out. I'm very sorry, Games Workshop. That is not a problem for anybody that was playing with what the rule obviously said. I can't rebut that. You just have to pretend that it's there, not there. Press that button. Yeah, that shouldn't be a change for anybody. Okay. And then down here, question: if an enemy operative is incapacitated at the end of a turning point due to Inferno tokens, does that count for the Purge with Flame tactical op? No. It must specifically be the attacks that incapacitate them. I wasn't ever going to take Purge with Flame because it's hard to score. Now I've made it slightly, a tiny bit even harder to score than I thought it was. So now it's gone from a never take to still never take. Thank you, I guess. This one's interesting though. If an activation is interrupted, can an additional act of faith be used during the interruption? For example, if an act of faith during an novitiate operative's activation, then the activation is interrupted by a Phobos strike team's track target action. Can I use another act of faith during the track target's Overwatch action? No. So this is quite good. It provides a little bit of opportunity for Phobos players to be sneaky. If I've got an operative who maybe performs a shooting attack and has put herself in an awkward position to perform a shooting attack, and then you see that I've used an act of faith to do a reroll or to change a dice into a crit or a hit in that shooting attack, when you then interrupt after the shooting attack and say, well, now I'm going to shoot you back, I cannot simply blinding light out of that situation. I cannot, although I'd be on engage, but maybe I was shooting with my crossbow. Okay, so I can't blinding light out of that situation, nor can I use Act of Faith to change the defense dice, although I can still use the reroll Act of Faith because you can use that Act of Faith as many times as you like. So a little bit of a boon there for Phobos when they're playing against the novitiates. Vet Guard. Really simple one. For the TNT Kai, you have to be both within black and placing your mind token so it's visible to the operative. So you can't phase your mind token through a thin wall. I have to wonder if this FAQ came up because they were playtesting with the new Into the Dark terrain, which is a lot of thin walls, and they realised that actually, maybe it was fine when it was mostly barricades because the Vet Guardsman could just kind of pop the TNT over the top of the barricade and nobody really cares about that. But now with those really tall walls that are supposed to represent something that's kind of fused with the floor and the ground, they didn't want Vet Guards kind of phasing bombs through thin walls. I reckon that's where that change has come from. Makes a lot of sense to me. In normal open boards, it is going to affect people who would just kind of popping the dynamite over the top of the barricades and things. Wormblade. So the Cult Ambush ability, which lets you get, I think it's rerolls on your first shoot action. With a blast or a torrent, do the rerolls apply to all the shooting attacks in the action or just the first one? They apply to all of them. That's how I would have assumed it was played, but I don't have a lot of experience. Wormblade players, if this represents a buff to how it was standardly being played, do let me know. I've not got much experience into playing against Wormblade. Even though Mrs. TI has a Wormblade team, she doesn't favour using it, so... it seems like a buff if it wasn't already being played that way. Bloodied! Oh my gosh, this is one of the worst things. So I had to go and get the Morok book, page 55, change the Diabolic Bomb to a ranged weapon. So they accidentally printed the combat symbol next to the clearly ranged Diabolic Bomb. The Diabolic Bomb has obviously a ranged profile. It has the range rule, so it's got range red. It's got indirect. It's clearly a grenade. If anybody was trying to take advantage of this obvious misprint somehow, they need to go and sit in the corner and think about life, because it was obvious what the Diabolic Bomb was. It was a super crack grenade, and now it's got its ranged weapon icon. So that's how it should be. That's fine. Okay, oh boy, Phobos. Right, Phobos have a lot of text. Page 40, infiltrate to detonate. Change the second sentence to read, when making these shooting attacks, each operative, friendly and enemy, within blue is a valid target, but when determining if it is in cover, treat the operative saboteur explosives token as the active operative. So, as far as I can see from reading the rule, it always used to say that it said each operative that was within blue was visible. Now it's explicitly saying that they are friendly and enemy, so it does hurt friendlies, and it's explicitly saying that they're valid targets, not just visible. I think this is just clarification, but it's clarification for people that really didn't want to believe that the explosives would hurt their own men. Alright? The plant saboteur explosives here and the plant haywire mine here have received the same clarification about phasing their explosives through walls that I covered on the veteran guard slide. Okay, the incursor mine layer proximity special rule, it just says you ignore all ballistical modifiers. So if the mine layer is injured, it doesn't affect the roll to hit for the mine when it explodes, right? Pretty obviously. So you don't have to, he can even be dead and you don't get any negatives. So that's fine. Smoke grenades have had their inevitable nerf. So for those of you that are unaware, in the compendium, Phobos Marines had access to smoke grenades, and they used to say in the compendium they're obscured if a single cover line goes through the smoke. And then they FAQ'd that in the compendium like ages ago, like 6 months ago, to say, oh, they're obscured if it has to be every cover line, so it was a nerf to smoke. And then Phobos came out with the unnerfed rules for smoke, and then almost everybody said, oh, well, they're obviously going to get the nerfed rules for smoke. A lot of people were playing it that way already, that it has to be every cover line, and now they've just made it explicit that it's every cover line. So smoke's worse. If you weren't already playing it that way, I think it's still very good. I think smoke grenades are still very important to the Phobos. I would still take them. Probably 2 of them. But, yeah, if you weren't already playing it as that rule, as it was in the Compendium FAQ, the honeymoon period is now over, alright? And you've now got to use the normal smoke grenade rules. And then the Q&A. So the Incursor Marksman's Track Target ability says, if the enemy operative is not incapacitated or revived as a result, finish its activation. What does that finish mean? Does it mean it finishes straight away? Or does it mean the player gets to finish? It means that the opponent continues and is allowed to finish their activation, rather than their activation is then truncated. Okay? I think most people understood that, but it's good to have it written down. Does the Incursor Marksman's Trap Target action allow it to perform the Overwatch more than once in the same turning point? No. Again, I think most people had understood that, but now it's been written down. How do you determine the climb distance when using the grapnel launcher and the first bullet point of the Vanguard strategic ploy? So these are both things that make it easier for you to move up and down terrain for Reavers with the Reaver-only equipment. Determine the normal distance, apply grapnel launcher, and then apply Vanguard. So, for example, a 2-circle climb would require a circle with grapnel, and Vanguard would ignore that circle. So your Reaver with a grapnel launcher, when Vanguard is active, effectively has fly on a normal-sized building. Or a big building with scalable. Like, he's going to effectively have fly on any kind of standard terrain layout, which is the way I thought it was played. How do you determine drop distance when using the grapnel launcher? And the same, so as above, you determine the distance, apply the grapnel launcher, and then apply Vanguard. So a drop of a circle will be halved to black by the grapnel launcher. Drop distances of less than circle are ignored. So it would allow the operative to use the first bullet point of Vanguard elsewhere during that activation if they wanted to, because they wouldn't need that. Again, was obvious to me, but obviously they felt it needed to be written down. How do you resolve Vox Break and the Umbra Shroud if both take effect? The Umbra Shroud is a narrative thing, so I'm not familiar with it, but apparently you apply both. Your opponent must reroll critical hits, and then they can't reroll anything else. Hope that means something to the narrative players. Final thoughts. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and particularly let me know if I am wrong about that. That the flaws on vantage points now providing cover when before they didn't, and the implications for models that are on conceal on a vantage point because they've got a silent weapon usually, because that seems like a big buff to that sniper class of model that people already thought were obnoxious. So if I'm wrong, let me know why I'm wrong in the comments. If you found this summary useful, because I know that these FAQs can be quite challenging to go through and find and pick out the new things, please do like and subscribe. It really helps out. The number of subscribers is ticking up as time goes on. Especially this week, I've been able to get a video out every day. YouTube really loves that, so I'm noticing more subscribers coming in. A big thing you can do if you want to support the channel and you're already subscribed, actually old school, word of mouth, tell your friends, link them to my channel, say, oh, you really like Kill Team, you really like Kill Team stuff on YouTube, have you seen this guy, he's quite cool, or whatever, annoying, whatever you think of me, that would be good. And there will be a hobby stream tomorrow, 7 PM UK time, so don't expect a video tomorrow unless GW drops some sort of news like this that needs to be covered. Alright, hope that you have had a fantastic day, whatever you are doing, and cheerio, folks, have a great evening. Bye-bye.